Hello, I'm joining you this morning from Cubby Cubby Country. I'm Jacqueline Brinkman, CEO of Economic Development Australia, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this conversation with Dr. Christian Ketels. Christian is joining us this year at the National Economic Development Conference in Newcastle, and as keynote will lead discussions around this year's theme, Shaping Tomorrow's Economy. Christian Ketels is a global expert in economic competitiveness and strategy and currently serves as lead economist at the World Bank. He spent over 2 decades at Harvard Business School as a faculty member and principal associate at Professor Michael Porter's Institute for Strategy and Competitiveness. He's also a senior advisor at the House of Governance, Stockholm School of Economics, director and co-chair of Innovation Fund Denmark, and a member of the Scientific Advisory Board at Orchestra, the Basque Institute for Competitiveness. Dr. Ketels has advised a wide range of governments, corporations, and international organisations. Christian, we are so delighted to be welcoming you to Newcastle, New South Wales, in a couple of months in October. Can't wait to see you here in Australia.
Jacqueline, it has been far too long. I'm really looking forward to coming to Australia again. I would say, especially now, we're still called the lucky country. And, there are many parts of the world that you look at where there's crisis, uncertainty, a lot of disruption going on. So I think it'll be great to learn what's going on in Australia and really share with you, how we look at this new world and try to make sense of it.
Well, our members are really looking forward to seeing you. I'm really looking forward to seeing you. I was trying to think how long it has been since we last had you in Australia.
I'm almost afraid to say how long it was, because that shows how old we've all become, but it must have been almost 8 to 10 years, I think. At least that was the last time I was in South Australia. And then, I had a couple of other visits to the country, but yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Christian, look, you are a leading voice in competitiveness, of course, particularly through the lens of clusters and regional economic development. And you've also spent so much of your career analysing global macroeconomic trends. In your view, with everything happening right now, what do you see as the most significant global forces shaping economies, and how do you see that impacting Australia specifically?
So I think we've started to see and better understand sort of the core driver of what's going on around us. And I would say, one key pillar is really what now people talk about as geoeconomics. So sort of the rules of the global economy are shifting, they're changing. We haven't really figured out where they will land. But we do understand that sort of the nature of these global markets in which we compete are changing. And I think we that have worked on competitiveness for many years have to realize that sort of not all of the old rules continue to apply. One of the rules that we always talked about is basically the power of productivity. That productivity is the determining factor of your prosperity and basically the growth trajectory of your economy. Now, productivity is still absolutely crucial. But I think what we've also seen is that now there is much more focus on value capture rather than just value creation, which productivity is all about. So I think we need to figure out sort of who is trying to influence this game, who is trying to influence where the profits and where the value creation is shifting. Now, that's not the only thing that's going on. And I think at the conference, we'll talk about some of these other factors as well. One that it has been around for us for a while is sustainability. The green transition might not be as politically popular in all parts of the world, but it's continuing. And I think, when you go into regions, you see these changes in many sectors in many parts of the world going on. So that is sort of an ongoing trend that we have to deal with. And then the other one, of course, is technology. I think we've seen technology disruption in so many parts of our economies, not just in the traditional technology sector, but really throughout so many industries and so many value chains. Now, if you take that together, I think that really tells you the story why it is so important that we sit down at the conference, talk to each other, and really listen to each other. Because what's going on is not just sort of a marginal change here and there. It's really sort of a change in the way that the game is organized. And we have to figure that out together. Now, I'm too far away to really give advice in Australia, but I think one of your key sectors is the mining industry and continues to be the mining industry. And that's almost a microcosmos where you see all these things coming together. What do we need mining for? You know, not so much coal, but more critical minerals. Who are we selling this to? You know, is it China? Is it other countries? What are the technologies that we're using, and what's the type of impact that has on our communities? All of these things are changing. So we know that mining will continue to be in a very important part of the Australian economy in many of your regions. But the way that this plays out is really open again. And I think it's up to us to sort of shape how these trends affect regional economies.
You talked about productivity there. Obviously, that is a hot topic in Australia at the moment. The Albanese government here in Australia is entering its second term, recently held an economic reform roundtable, which was really focused on this question of productivity. Of course, as you say, Australia is on paper the lucky country, but as we've discussed for many years, you know, Australia has appalling status in terms of complexity, you know, its economic complexity. So EDA has released its position around the policies that we would like to see around place-based economic development as a driver for boosting economic complexity and really recognizing the power of place in those macro policies that are coming to support the work of our place-based economic developers around the country. Based on your international experience, what lessons or frameworks could policymakers here in Australia seek to adopt if they are seeking to boost productivity and economic complexity in our cities and regional communities?
Right. So first of all, I should say, you know, obviously we're going to talk about clusters and the role of clusters as a tool, but you know, in general, I think one really has to be quite careful about sort of these silver bullet approaches that say, you know, wherever you are, whatever you're trying to achieve for your community, whatever your starting point is, this is the solution. I haven't seen that work around the world. What I do believe in, and that's actually also why cluster-based approaches are so powerful, is really to try to understand in a systematic way the specific context in which you are operating as a region and as a national economy. And then when you think about what to do, it is, again, it's not these sort of big, simple models that you should look for. You know, we always try to see, you know, what is a policy program that some successful location has implemented. Actually, what my experience is, it is much more that these activities are already quite well understood. The difference between successful and less successful locations is strategy. How do you prioritize and really figure out what to do? How do you bundle the right type of things together? And how to sequence them over time? There is no shortcut to competitiveness and productivity upgrading. It requires a lot of things that are not rocket science, but the complexity is the coordination. It's the coordination of the action agenda and the coordination also across the different players that have to come together in order to make this live. And I think that's really the magic. It's sort of more a process insight rather than to believe that, you know, another entrepreneurship program or a new venture capital fund or more money for R&D are going to fix it. All of those are good things. But it's really about how do you bring that together, focused on a very clear understanding of the market needs and your abilities to serve that.
At EDA, we always talk about that connecting piece, and here in Australia, you know, we continually speak about the need for better connectivity across all levels of government and within industry and the tertiary sector and the research sector. Is there a place in the world where you see that sort of that connectivity, that glue, being really well supported in order to support that kind of place-based approach for economic development?
Well, so I would say, you know, generally smaller economies tend to do a little bit better at that, you know. So I spend a large share of my life now in the Nordic countries, working and living both in Sweden and in Denmark. And the Swedes in particular, I think they love to talk about what they're really good at is collaboration. You know, sometimes it's a bit collaboration for its own sake, but there is some truth to it. I think there is an understanding that, you know, there's a community that's out there competing in a very harsh global environment. And the only way is to collaborate across the public and the private, within the public sector, between research and industry and so on. And so I think that creates the right type of mindset that can help you to make that collaboration happen. Now, I know that Australia is known for a very individualistic culture, and the sort of people shaping their own future, and that can sometimes work against that idea of working together and collaboration. So I think you will find your way to shape the right culture that works in Australia to make this happen. But there's no one model that gets it all right. And especially now, I think, we have to see that as the global economy is changing, also the successful sort of small open economies, the Swedens and Singapores and Switzerlands of this world have to sort of adjust and figure out, how can they deal with these new rules of the game.
And it seems to me when I hear you speak about collaboration, Christian, always that we talk about it doesn't just happen by accident either. And yes, cultural nuances can come into play, but across the board, you need intervention and action to facilitate that, to foster that, right? To be the coordinating force, which for EDA, many of our members, our economic developers, are playing that role in communities, cities, communities, large cities, and smaller regional communities across the country. Yeah, do you think that that's right? That you really do need that interventionist approach in order to have meaningful collaboration occur?
Yeah, I would say, there are different roles to play here. I would rather talk about an orchestrator. You need to find somebody who really brings this together, and not just as sort of a bottom-up service provider that says, I give you some coffee and some cookies and a room to meet and talk to each other. That's often not enough. You need somebody who sort of leads from behind, but leads. And says, I will help you, help this community to really develop a strategic direction and come together. And that, I think, is exactly what modern economic developers can do. There's also specific services that they need to provide, but I think this helping strategies to form, helping communities to really get a sense of what they stand for, what their key capabilities are to compete in a global market is critical. Let me make one other point, because I think that's something, especially for regional economic developers, that I often see as a real challenge. And that's the collaboration across different levels of government, especially national government and regional government. We often, as people that believe that location and regions matter, then say, more power should go through the regions. Yes, but not everything is decided in regions, and not all the resources are at the national level. What we need is better dialogue, and I think we need to understand what needs to happen at what level of government, and what are the roles of different players in the system. And that's often where you can get much more leverage. Otherwise, regional initiatives stay regional, they stay small, and you don't get the scale of impact that you really need these days.
Christian, just changing gears a little bit, you mentioned the disruption that we're seeing due to, tech and AI, and, of course, our global economy is rapidly evolving because of these technological disruptions that we're seeing. At the National Economic Development Conference, we will be hosting a lively debate with the proposition, AI job creator or job killer. It'll be a bit of fun, but it'll be serious fun, as is always the case at the National Economic Development Conference with EDA members. I'm actually really personally interested in that growing debate around whether or not technology will deliver widespread social benefits naturally, or whether, in fact, without intentional design and policy settings, the progress and the advantages will likely to concentrate wealth and power rather than distributing it across communities. In your view, how can Australia build regional competitiveness with that future-ready approach and ensuring innovation lifts, but across every community rather than just sort of deepening the divides?
Right.
And, that global conversation, I really want to bring that to Australia with our practitioners.
So there was a recent survey of economists that was quite interesting on this topic. So basically, looked at a range of topics, and it turns out that on many topics, economists widely agree. For example, on the impact of tariffs and so on. Then there are a few topics on which they disagree. So there's one camp in this, and the other camp in the other corner. The impact on AI is actually a third category where a lot of economists say, it is really too early to tell. There's too many things that we don't know to really assess what's going to happen. But the way that you framed the question to say, okay, is this going to happen naturally, or does it require some sort of setting the scene? I would say, it is obvious that the impact is going to depend quite a lot on how we respond. Let me give you a different example. A new technology like AI is a little bit like doing trade, opening up for global trade. Because global trade means you can use the technologies of other countries that can do things differently, and then you can do that. Now, if you look at the impact of trade on economies, it has been widely different. And it has been widely different because countries have differed in the way that they've enabled their economies and societies to take advantage or be affected negatively by the impact of trade. And, Australia has seen a lot of its manufacturing industry disappear, maybe for good reasons, you're not a super large economy and so on, but other countries have been able to keep their manufacturing by investing heavily in skills and technology and R&D. It will depend on how we manage that type of transition. But again, I want to come back to my first statement that there's also a lot that's still unknown. One of the key questions is really, is AI going to be a technology that supports skills or that supplants skills? So is this going to basically make very high-skilled people more redundant because people that don't have the education can use AI and still perform the same tasks? Or is it going to be the obvious, a little bit more like robotics in the past, that basically AI is going to make a lot of the people that now do sort of more manual but slightly more advanced tasks obsolete? There are examples for both types of outcomes currently out there. So I think it's a little bit too early to say, how this exactly is going to play out. But there are a couple of sort of non-regret things that regions in Australia can do. And I think there is really a lot that has to do with the flexibility of enabling people to adjust to new situations and enabling them to have the skills. I mean, higher skills is in almost all of these outcomes going to be better, either for using and working with AI or for transitioning to other activities where AI can play that role.
Christian, we are so pleased that you're coming to Australia. We really look forward to of course, your keynote, but you're generously going to be at the conference in conversation at breakout sessions, and I know that our members will really appreciate your presence and your input and your knowledge and experience. So thank you again for coming to see us, and we very much look forward to welcoming you to Newcastle in October.
Perfect. I'm looking forward to it. There's always so much to learn coming to Australia, and I'm sure I will leave Newcastle a smarter person than I have arrived.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christian Ketels.
Thank you.